Welcome back, Midnight Mafia. Today, I have an absolutely unbelievable story for you, and this would fall more in the category of mysterious and strange. Something I'm gonna try to do a little more for you guys, because people are like, hey, we like some strange stuff now and then, so I was like, I got you. And also, I just wanted everybody to know that I truly couldn't do this without you. So if you could please try and support the channel, I would highly appreciate that. And there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can look at the merch right under here. I'm always putting new things out. If you see something you like, grab it. But also, the most important thing would either be Patreon or that join button that's right near the subscribe button. And on join, there's 4 different tiers, and on Patreon, I think I got like the same 4 tiers, but then I added an extra 2, so there's 6 tiers. Join the family, help me out, help this channel out, it would truly mean a lot. But I didn't forget, last week you guys got above 70 likes, which means bonus episode. Had a lot of stuff going on this week, so the bonus episode is going to drop the day after tomorrow on Sunday. I plan on having it up Sunday afternoon, maybe evening, and that one, like I put up in the poll, what do you guys want? Paranormal, mysterious, true crime? It was in that order, paranormal, mysterious, then true crime. So today you get a mysterious one, and on Sunday, the day after tomorrow, you get a paranormal one. I hope you enjoy. But regardless of all that, enough talking. Well, I'm going to be talking more, but about the story, because as of now, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own. Let's go. Now, this story has a lot to imagine, so whether you close your eyes or you can do it with your eyes open, I want you to imagine and grip this whole story with me. Are you ready? Okay, so the scorching sun was beating down on the town of Gurley, Missouri in 1925. And this was happening as a repair crew grappled with a seemingly routine job. You know, sweat was dripping from their foreheads as they struggled to swap out an old well-pumped motor for a new one. But in one fateful moment, this heavy equipment slipped from their grasp, and it literally fell down this narrow 16-foot dark pit, which was at the time an abandoned well. So the small team kind of watched in horror as it landed with the sickening thud. And deep within the darkness below, there was no other option, obviously, than to prepare and lower somebody down into that treacherous pit to go and retrieve the equipment. Now, normally, this might sound like something outside of the job that's fun. Hey, I get to rappel today. And for some people that volunteered, it didn't turn out to be fun, because little did they know, something very sinister lurked in those depths. A voracious predator lying in wait for its next unexpected victim. So we have right now Percy Kehoe, which was the youngest and the most agile of the crew at just 18 years of age, eagerly volunteering for the descent. He kind of wanted to prove himself. And you know, his cocky grin hid his fear and doubt that gnawed deep in his gut. So as the others then started to prepare this rickety wooden ladder and secured Percy's safety harness on, their banter and, you know, casual jokes were a thin veil over the grave danger that actually lay ahead. So Percy, with a deep breath, descended into this inky blackness down to the shaft, swallowed by its depths until his labored breathing and occasional thumps of his boots on ancient brickwork echoed back up towards the opening. Hey, how's it looking down there, Percy? One of the men shouted out after a tense pause, and the silence hung heavy for a moment before an abrupt, bone-rattling thud, and then a muffled groan reverberating up from below. And then another man said, Percy, you okay down there? And as panic was seeping into his voice, they waited for a response that didn't come. And in the darkness of the pit, the men could barely make out the shapes of their companion that went below. In fact, when the men descended, just the eerie glow of the headlamps was the only thing that provided a small glow of light into that vast void. So the men's faces at this point were pale in this dim light. and their eyes were wide with unease as they peered down into this abyss. And the dark walls of this pit seemed to swallow up any stray beams of light, leaving only deep shadows and a gnawing sense of dread ahead. And down in this forbidden pit, darkness loomed, swallowing up whoever dared to enter. A wavering light from a single flashlight flickering against the wall, revealing just a small portion of the ancient brickwork that made up this pit's whole interior. And the air was thick with a smell of damp earth and this decay, as if the pit itself was rotting from within, and the faint scent of sweat and fear mingled with it, emanating from the men as they prepared to descend after Percy. And also the air was musty and stale, tinged with this metallic scent of fear and this faint odor of decay. It was suffocating, as the pit itself was almost closing in on them. Mixed into all of this was the men's fear and adrenaline, as the men above struggled to keep their composure and make sense of the situation and why Percy wasn't answering back. Percy's name just kept echoing throughout the darkness of the pit, met only with this unsettling silence. The sound of their own voices seemed to betray them, bouncing off the walls, then disappearing into the unknown depths below. And that's when Jake, the elderly crew foreman, raised his voice above this eerie quiet, and he said, "All right, guys, I'm gonna go check on him," waving off the hesitant protest of his fellow crew members. With a determined look in his eye, he began his descent slowly into the pit. But right then, as Jake went just below enough to disappear into the shadows, it was clear that both he and Percy had fallen victim to some sinister force that was lurking at the bottom of this pit. At the time, the rest of the crew remained oblivious, still under the impression that this was a simple routine injury or maybe some equipment malfunction that had to be sorted out. Next, we have Mark, who was Percy's older brother. He begged to be lowered down next, and his cries for help as he went down, growing more desperate and frantic as he descended. But just as he reached about 2/3 of the way down the ladder, his screams abruptly ceased, choked out by an unseen force. Next came Ed, the quiet and stoic veteran crewman. He seemed frozen in place on the ladder for what felt like an eternity before falling heavily to the ground below with a sickening crunch. And once again, his gasping breaths were silenced in an instant. This once bustling pit now lay eerily still and silent, save for the occasional groans and creaks from within its deep depths. At this point, desperation overrides logic as Sam, the elderly father and patriarch of the crew, demands the harness and to make the descent despite his arthritic limbs. And his sons were clinging to each other in fear as they watched their father slowly lower himself down into this dark abyss. And as he crossed the threshold, a hot wave of this slimy, putrid vapor blasts up from below, engulfing him in its foul embrace. At this point, Sam's body convulses as he struggles to expel this unholy reek of rotten decay that burns his throat and blinds his eyes. What could be possibly going on at the bottom of that cave to cause all of this to happen? But then, in a moment of horror, the gravity of their situation crashes right down on them. Because as he plummeted deeper into the shaft, he was greeted by this ghastly sight of twisted, lifeless forms among the bones of the past victims. Explained as these limp sacks of contaminated flesh slowly stiffening as this invisible killer infiltrated their bodies. And with his last bit of strength, Sam manages a final warning before succumbing to unconsciousness. And that's when he says,
"Gas! Get out of the..."
And that was it. And it was too late, as his body crumpled backward and dislodged from the ladder rungs. It wasn't until this moment when the men finally noticed that the motor they had been struggling to retrieve was the very source of death for their fellow crew members. In a state of shock, the two remaining crew members finally understood the gravity of this situation. The invisible killer that had been unleashed in this pit had taken hold, and there was no stopping it now. Their desperate attempts at rescue had only resulted in more and more lives lost right before their very eyes. And as the sun at this point began to sink below the horizon, the grieving families of the deceased arrived at the scene, and their hearts were heavy with confusion and devastation. I mean, they were met with a chaotic scene filled with frantic men and a palpable sense of tragedy that just occurred. Hushed cries and prayers filled the air as the shocking reality sank in. Their loved ones had literally been choking to death underground this whole time, just 18 feet away. And it wasn't well into the night when emergency crews with special breathing equipment could arrive and begin the grim task of the body retrieval. And at that point, one by one, the stiffness of the corpses of the crew were raised from the pit's depths, no longer recognizable to the traumatized onlookers. And by morning's first light, rows of body bags now lay in solemn ranks across the Gurley fairgrounds. The town's unfathomable loss was visceral and disfiguring, not just in the loved ones that perished, but their false sense of superiority and invincibility was shattered in an instant by this cruel hand of nature. You see, because hidden deep within this unassuming well pit were these ancient pockets of toxic gas lying in wait for centuries, and with a single amateur mistake, the use of an exhaust pump in a confined space, they were unleashed. And at that point, suffocating fumes just filled the air, searing their lungs and scorching their skin as they realized with horror that they had awoken a deadly force beyond their control. The careless mistake of overlooking a critical detail had unexpectedly awoken an ancient predator from its centuries-long rest. And this tragedy serves as a crucial lesson that humanity's advancements in technology do not grant us immunity from the dangers of the natural world, no matter how insignificant they may appear at that time. Because on that fateful summer afternoon, an entire crew learned this lesson when they fell victim to the hubris of assuming that a routine repair procedure was free from the lurking and merciless risk that surrounded them. I mean, who among us can predict the wrath of these ancient forces, unleashed by usually our arrogance and carelessness? The Gurley incident serves as a brutal reminder that when we believe ourselves to be the masters of our environment and universe, we are only making ourselves more vulnerable to the merciless laws of this world. May the names of those lost souls forever rest in peace, but also serve as a warning. Progress is not found in reckless bravado, but in cautious wisdom and humble respect for the insatiable unknown that lurks beyond all our control. And I know that was a strange one for you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I will have a paranormal one for you on Sunday. And if you still feel like watching, make sure to check out one of the videos on the screen. That's really all I got for you today. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see y'all later. Cheers.